Welcome everyone to yet another video on the channel. Among the numerous questions that authors find themselves asking, and believe me, there are quite a few, one of the ones that stands out is outlining. Should you do it? Should you not do it? Does it save time? Does it create more time? Is it more trouble than it's worth? All of these and other such things go through an author's mind when trying to decide whether or not they should outline their story. For those of you who may not know, outlining a story is essentially plotting your story from beginning to middle to end before actually writing it. That's it in a nutshell. Now, there are varying degrees of outlining. Different people do it differently. Some people will outline the entire story in very great detail, down to the point where they actually have an idea of what kind of dialogue will be taking place on page 86. Some outline a little more loosely. They might hit major plot points, major events that happen, and the significance of what those will be. Some authors swear by outlining. Some authors swear against outlining. And some authors do not yet know whether they should or should not outline. It's a very interesting conundrum for some people. Some people don't like to feel constrained by the nature of outlining. For some people, that's just a bit too restrictive for them and their particular writing preference and or style. For others, it's just that thing they need that enables their creative juices to flow out onto the page. And while I don't know where you are in your particular situation, I do know some things that could help you with your decision if you find yourself teetering between the two options. First thing you need to do is decide what kind of story you're writing. What do I mean by that? How many story points are there going to be? How many subplots are there? Do you intend to return to this story later, perhaps, after writing other books and maybe add or write a prequel or something? All of these are questions that go into the original question. So figuring out the mood and setting and scope of your story will really help when it comes to deciding whether or not to outline. These things should play rather heavily into your decision. The reason being, if you are a more sporadic writer who has mainly written short stories or novellas or what have you, and now you want to tackle a 180K epic novel, for you, it might be a good idea to have an outline, even if it's a brief one. That's a big change. And you might not be one of those people whose mind just kind of automatically goes into a new way of thinking, because it will take a different frame of thinking and writing to tackle something like that. How vast a scope is your story on? Is it a more simplistic story, or more straightforward and to the point? Or are there a whole bunch of side characters, subplots, races, languages, places that fit in and intertwine with the story? For something like that, it might behoove you again to have an outline even of sorts. Even if you've done this type of thing before, it could help keep you knowing where you're going and keep straight your vision for when you get there. Now, I'm not saying that if your story is on a great scope, an outline is absolutely a must. Plenty of authors write giant, huge epics and never outline. I'm not saying it's not doable. It's quite doable. But for some people, taking on a great project like that, an outline might be kind of necessary. And again, especially if you're going to write a grand tale and then maybe come back to it later and add some things or do something else in that world. Then if you had an outline beforehand, then you will have stayed in that outline instead of deviated out of it and then have certain things or inconsistencies that are too late to fix now that you're coming back. You see what I'm saying? Ah, so you, Black Fantasy Man, are an outline author, I never said that. I'm simply giving you some facts and truth. Do with them what you will. I mean, whichever option you go with, outlining or not outlining, don't be lazy about it, because both have their own challenges. For instance, outlining, to a degree, does in fact require more work. You've got to plot the story beforehand and know where you're going, write those points out, and then kind of more or less stick to it, unless you want to add more time to the time it takes to complete your project in the first place. Which isn't bad if that's how you want to roll, but that's kind of not how I prefer to roll. Another thing with outlining, you might get writer's block writing your outline. I mean, it does happen. You're still writing and creating the story. Depending on how extensively you're going to outline, that writer's block might hit you. Now, choosing to not outline also comes with its pros and cons. Probably the greatest pro would be the complete and total freedom of not outlining. The story takes you where it will, and you mold it and observe it and coax it and nurse it and watch it grow and sprout in this direction and that direction in ways that are sometimes amazing. Or not. Without outlining, you are liable to run into certain problems that you would not necessarily have run into had you outlined beforehand. Things like plot holes, inconsistencies, brick walls in between the story where you have no idea where to go, and other such things. Some of these hurdles or blocks can last for quite some time. It can be very difficult to get over them once they've set themselves in your way. Outlines largely prevent that. Not totally, but for the most part they do. Now, if you are a more sporadic writer, you are probably going to find it quite difficult to stick to outlines because you want to get to the story and you just want to go, and that's fine. Go for it. If you are a more cautious, more deeply reasoning type of writer, you're probably going to go for the outline, and that's fine too. It's important that you choose the option that best suits your personality. Another thing is that sometimes you should maybe experiment in the other option. If you are an author that never uses outlines, maybe for some story you should at least try and see, because it might actually turn out that outlining and you become pretty good friends. And on the other side of the coin, if you're an author who always outlines, maybe try one time or two not outlining. At least give it a try. And look, if you're still stuck on the fence, then just get writing. The most important thing is to just get writing. Don't get stuck in the harbor because you're afraid of which ship to choose. Sooner or later, but usually sooner if you're serious about it, you will figure out which option works for you. What I would advise someone who has never done either before but wants to just get into writing, perhaps write a short story and outline the short story briefly. Just a brief outline of the major plot points of your short story. Then write your short story and see how long it took you and how easy or difficult it was. Then try winging it on the next one. Forget the outline and just go with the flow. See how that works for you. And please be aware that no matter which option you choose, you are going to get stuck at some point or another. There's no avoiding that. Whether you always outline or you never outline, at some point you will get stuck in either way. Writing is rarely ever a long haul of smooth sailing. That's not our fate. And that's all for today, good people. Like this video if you wish, share this video if you so desire, and subscribe if it suits your fancy. Until the next video,